Hello.
Woo! All right, what's happening?
Let's try it again. Take two. Welcome to Dateline New Haven, and it's Thursday Pundits, folks, on WNHH, New Haven's home for community radio. I'm Paul Bass, inviting you to look behind the headlines on the stories that make our community tick. And what we do on Thursday Pundits is with the best pundits in the local media universe, we go over the stories that have been in the headlines and say what they're all about, what they mean. We got Babs Rawls-Ivy, editor of the Inner City News, host of Love Babs, Love Talk, and the woman behind the scenes at all the great nonprofits that make New Haven work.
All of them.
Great to see Babs, as always.
Hello.
Markeisha Ricks, veteran journalist and mentor to the next generation. Hello, Markeisha. Thanks so much for making time for Pundits.
Happy Thursday, everyone.
And we're wishing a flua shlema, a continuation of healing for Lucy Gelman, who's on the mend, but is wisely taking a week off, and we'll try to do our best with others. So who said the following, folks?
We jumping right in.
Ready?
Mm-hmm.
Quote, "Don't come into New Haven and shit it up."
Yes, Jim Tercio.
All right, I promised Babs because we didn't do it last time. Now, who was Jim Tercio saying that to, and why?
He was getting on to somebody who had too many people in an apartment, didn't he?
Not just too many people. This guy, he was saying this guy named Bart Saliga.
Mm-hmm.
Bart lives somewhere in Fairfield County or something, right? He owns 3 houses in the Hill, like 3 families or something, right on Spring Street. He had 100 people, college students from India, like practically, it's like a roach motel. It's kind of sad.
No.
But they were all right. They had some kind of thing going. They're UNH students, couldn't afford the rents in New Haven. He had them cheap. We'll get you right there. So the city busted him and said you can't run illegal rooming houses. What you think about that?
You can't run illegal rooming houses.
Also, I just always think about, we have fires in this city in ways that in no other place I've ever lived
there was a
has
rooming
fires.
house. A rooming house near there in the Hill had an illegal rooming house that had the fire where someone died.
And just thinking about if it's the number of people that it was, and that's not the right number of people, the ability to save lives if that place had caught fire is just harrowing.
And Jim's the building inspector for the city.
I want these landlords to understand that these are human beings, and that you cannot. Why would you want? You yourself wouldn't live like that,
And don't.
And so now you would do this for money, just for money, because you're only doing it for money. You're not.
It's a gold rush.
You're not doing it because you care that these kids.
It's weird this is going on. We
can't
know it goes on
afford
other
rent.
places, and that kind of, I guess someone blew the whistle. A lot of that goes
Well,
on.
I mean, I think you get tired of seeing it, and you just like enough.
Right.
I heard an interesting take on this bust from Eli Sabin. He's a sort of super up and coming alder. He was at Yale, now he's East Rock. He graduated, and he was saying he thinks what that's about is a crisis that no one in the city is paying much attention to. We always talk about affordable housing, but what we spend most of our time arguing about is whether someone's taxes are going with $300. Like there's an isolated person that's gone up like incredibly, but some $300 and it hurts a working class person. But lots more people's rents, not homeowner taxes. Rents are going up thousands of dollars a year because of the housing shortage in the city. He claimed that rents went up 20% in New Haven last year, and they were already high. And that COG, that's the Council of Governments, they said we're 12,000 apartments short in New Haven. 8,000
In New Haven specifically.
Yeah, that we need
Wow.
8,000 more units.
Well, they're trying their best to build them.
They are for market rate.
Right.
Yeah. So 8,000 we
But
needed
they can't we can't hit, because we've talked about this a lot in this whole rush to build apartments in the city, which is that the hope that we get to a tipping point where we have enough stock that it actually decreases because we cannot move them. But I think in an article, I think about the coming back of and maybe we're going to talk about it today, about the Ashman Street apartments.
We just might. I have some quotes on my
yeah,
list.
so
I'll tell you which
that's
one.
finally coming back online, right? It's finally underway again. And what is there somebody with a mathematical equation that says we've reached the critical mass that's going to actually
I think when we
impact the
find that out,
cost?
that's the market. I don't mean to
Yeah.
sound all Republican and everything.
Yeah.
But this would happen in the 90s when they built too many. some investors, but they're all protected, so they're fine. They lost some money because they built too many, and then they became affordable, which was cool.
I don't think we're ever going to get there because nationally there's a shortage.
Yeah.
Right? We're millions, like 40 million something homes, like short of not just like homes, but also apartments. Like, so there's just not enough stock.
And
So
I guess,
that's-
and the more that they build, and they build these they build the apartments that are market rate rent, the more the people that can pay the market rate rent comes.
Right.
Do you see what I'm saying? Like, so.
And
Well,
for them,
Babs-
it's a discount
well,
because if
for
I'm like, I
Babs-
can live, like, this is actually cheap rent for somebody.
So Babs
It's expensive for someone
kind
else.
of put her finger on one of the big debates here. And Babs, would you mind getting the mic a little closer? 'Cause
Okay.
Bring it
pull
up
a
higher,
little
maybe.
bit. So what some people say, they look at House Street. House Street, they've been filling in those vacant lots, and they're tearing down a house to build a bigger one, the gas station. What they say there, some people, including Eli Sabin, and the build people say, it's okay if they build a lot of market rates, because what happens, if you build those for the people coming from Woodbridge or retiring and spending less money, they want to live in the city, or the Yaleys, then one block over on Dwight, the landlords will no longer be able to charge so much rent because there won't be such a shortage. So the working class person living on Dwight benefits if apartments for rich people
I
are
don't
built on
believe
I
housing.
don't
that.
believe that either because
I
if
just don't
those
believe
guys
that.
can't sustain themselves, because I don't know what the mortgage is for the littler guys who are maybe charging whatever they're charging.
Well, I think what we saw on the Hill was that they charge as much as they can, even if they're cramming 100 students in.
Right.
Because there's such a shortage that you pointed out that the argument of the build is when you have not enough apartments, then the rich people will push out the poorer people, or else the poor people are going to pay more. But if you have enough apartments, then then the landlords can't get as high a rent. I mean,
But
that's
this
sort
is
of
what I'm about
classic
to
supply and
say, which is
demand.
that those guys who are already kind of questionable landlords, they get pushed out. They sell to the kinds of people who are buying a property all over this city who don't care. They like, we have enough money either way. So we don't care. We're not going to fix it up. We're not going to make it nice. We don't
Right.
care about the neighborhood. We don't care if the sidewalk is cracked. We don't care if the road out front is raggedy. Like, we just don't care.
What they're going to do is they're going to charge as much as they can. So now get back to
Exactly.
the other argument. They can't charge as much if the market's more competitive.
Yes, they can.
They'll charge what they want.
They'll charge what they want.
But if there are enough apartments around,
What do you
that
mean
tenant,
enough for whom?
what I'm saying is that if there exist other apartments where the low-income tenant can go, in other words, if there are
Where
two
are
bad
those
landlords,
apartments at, though?
well, that's what we have to build. That's what the build people say. Build more so that then that tenant
But
has.
Have you seen these you know how much a raggedy ass apartment goes for?
But we're agreeing about that it's way too much.
That it's just not going to get cheaper. They're not going. If you
cheaper.
are
If
if you own a house and you get in $2,000 or $1,500 in a raggedy ass apartment,
You're not gonna
you
take
are
less.
not going to take $800.
But what if suddenly there are 3 raggedy-ass apartments run by slumlords, 3 different slumlords on the block?
I'm a Section 8
So the
and get more. Like,
So the tenant says, "I'm not going to your slumlord place for $1,500 because they'll give it to me for $1,400 across the street." Now they don't have that option because there aren't enough units.
That's not how
that's
that
supply
goes.
and demand.
Nope. That's not how that works. Because there's so many other variables.
There
Like,
are. Culture is a variable.
Well, not culture.
No, if rich people come in a neighborhood, they kind of change the tenor of a neighborhood. The police
Listen,
police it differently.
You got to put down a deposit. Some of these little raggedy ass apartments, they don't require so much of a deposit. It's a lot that goes on. They don't do any. They're not doing a whole lot of credit checking. They're not doing all the things that the high end
and
apartments
so
are
that
doing.
also is its own premium, is what Babs
Yes.
is saying. Like, if you want a no questions asked kind of apartment, then that has its own cost. It might not be as expensive as of an apartment that's going to, because the apartments that can charge more have algorithms that and also the adding in the fact that like these hedge funds have bought apartment buildings, so they use algorithms to get people out. So if you don't meet the requirements of their algorithm, even though everything about you suggests that you should be a good candidate for an apartment, and this is like even an expensive apartment that you're like, I don't even want to pay this amount of money, but this is what's available to me, they're weeding people out. Like they're just finding new forms of ways to discriminate against people. So if you're somebody who's in a situation like Babs is talking about, where you're like, I need not even a lease. I don't need a lease. I need somebody who's going to take my money month to month.
Yeah.
And ask no questions. I think about the 2 people who got, I don't know if they were evicted, but there were the 2 Latinx men that were written about, I think, a couple weeks ago, who are fighting being evicted.
The back pay.
Back pay on rent. But they're facing eviction, right?
Mm-hmm. No, they were already rent. They already
They'd
evicted
already
2 years
left.
ago. So that woman's actually gentrifying New Hallville while she's a state official giving housing money, while she's a zoning commissioner. As she gentrified that neighborhood.
And I think that's the bigger
she's trying to
problem is that
recover
there's
some
so
rent from them
much
from 2 years
money
ago.
to be had in real estate right now because
Yeah.
of the way things are. That it's very easy to not think about people as people, to even care that everybody needs a place to live.
Yeah.
So what would you
And
do programmatically? Like if you were suddenly in charge, hey, Marquisha Babs, you're in charge of everything now. How are we going to fix this problem?
Well, if universal basic income happened, that might make a difference. But
Would they
also,
just
like,
raise the
what
rent
is
to
the?
cover that?
But also, what is the incentive for land? Like right now, there is no incentive for landlords. Like even during, like, so people got really upset. Like landlords got really upset at people who weren't paying their rent during the height of the pandemic because they felt like they were getting a subsidy and that those people were just not paying even though they could because they either were still working or whatever they thought. But at the same time, like landlords wanted to maximize their profits. A lot of them knew that the cost of living was going up. They saw kind of the tea leaves and they're like, I can raise my rent. I can push people out. And unlike places like New York that have rent control, there has to be some balance that helps
maybe
keep
rent control
or something. I'm not against landlords making money, right? Like you have a mortgage to pay too.
No, you're against some lords, against gougers. You're
Exactly.
Against, yeah.
I'm against people taking advantage
got
of
a
people.
problem
And
down
I'm
in the
against
city
people
right
who
now.
want to make so much money that they're like, I don't care. Like I'd rather hold my property hostage than let somebody live there, like at a lower price. I'd rather it just be empty.
I kind of like the idea of some kind of idea of rent control
Oh, yeah.
that sort of benefits the high end people and the not so high end people. Like there's got to be the way to sort of do that,
I
even
think
if you
Silver
do it by
Spring,
block by
Maryland-
block or neighborhood by neighborhood. Because I just can't imagine that somebody would pay $2,500 a month in rent on the street that I live on, and I live on a great street, but there's no amenities to that, right?
And
There's no swimming pool. There's no tennis
An
court.
apartment there should not cost twice as much as my house.
And there should just be there should be places in the city everywhere that you can live that don't cost the maximum amount of money. Like I don't know when those apartments are supposed to come that are across from the Institute Library, that parking lot right there, and all of that right there is all supposed to become new apartments at some point. And those are supposed to be like micro apartments or something like that. But who's paying like that kind of money because it's downtown? So they're like, oh, we're not going to give you any parking. We're not going to give you this. There's not going to be that. But we're going to charge this amount of money because you live downtown and you're in
near
like
the train station.
a less than 500 square foot apartment. What?
And I think a micro apartment would be great for some of these kids that are transitioning out of youth continuum
Absolutely
or
agree.
out of foster care. There's a whole community, or kids who just can't be at home, right? Like they just want their own independence, but they can't afford. When I was a kid, I could afford things like that. These kids can't afford that.
And they also don't really
can't afford it.
exist. They don't actually exist.
when I was looking for an apartment 3 years ago, it was tough. I had a finite budget. I was like, this is as high as I could go.
When I moved here 8 years ago, this is why I've had a roommate most of the time that I was here, because when I moved here 8 years ago, it wasn't so much that we had this we hadn't started the building boom yet, and there were no vacancies though. So we were at a different point in that there weren't any vacancies among the apartments that already existed.
Mm-hmm.
So finding an apartment that wasn't crazy trash and also crazy expensive, at least for what I was making at the time. No shade.
yeah, shade's fair. Shade's fair. Because all's fair on Thursday Pundits on WNHH, New Haven's home for community radio, which you listen to here on 103.5 FM. The best pundits in the local media universe and beyond, running down the week's stories. Who said the following? Quote.
Uh-oh.
Ready?
Yeah.
I got to admit, this is an easy one. Some of these ones are easy.
Uh-oh.
Quote.
He always says that.
You don't understand what it's like to be in a room, no offense, everybody, with all white men and two little black women controlling that meeting.
Ooh, Tony Walker.
And she did it with dignity. She did it with pride. She did it with data and conviction.
Tony
Walker.
Hart.
Boom, boom.
Walker. That's Tony Walker.
Tony Walker.
Tony Walker.
is a state
Said it
representative.
about Tony Hart.
And tell
Yes.
why was she saying this? Where?
She was saying it at the unveiling of the official portrait
Of the mayor.
Oh, that took place this week.
That took place
Yes.
this
They
week.
unveiled a
It
portrait
was
of the
quite
mayor
the family reunion.
on the second floor of City Hall. They
Or
unveiled
repass.
her portrait.
I'm not going there.
And so Tony Walker used to be with Tony Hart when she was state senator.
She
They
had the
controlled the
best
appropriations committee. They actually were the two women that every dollar had to go by before it was spent by the state. We're talking $20 billion a year. Not shabby.
Not shabby.
What was that like? So I wasn't there. I read a lot about it. I heard Bab's description. I heard I read Maya's story. Talked to Maya. Were you there, Markeisha?
I was.
What'd you think?
It was great. Like I said, it felt like a family reunion, at least for me, because a lot of the people there I hadn't seen in 2 years since I left the Independent, and
since she left City Hall 2 years
and since
ago.
she left City Hall 2 years ago, and literally I think the last time I saw Mayor Harp in person was the night that it ended, because I was actually covering that night, oddly enough. So I was down at 50 Fitch where they were, and so I got to see Lawrence Grothier, who I had not seen since that night. And so it was a festive occasion. It felt festive. It felt people seemed happy to see each other. I think in those types of events, like 2 years later, like where we're all gathering together again, because that place was packed.
It was packed.
It was packed.
And it was lively, and it went on for hours.
And
I didn't stay long. I popped in.
She dipped out.
My
got
McFadden was
my
actually moved. She
Got my
said
alderman corsage and dipped out.
she felt it was a very special event. She felt that
I thought so.
She said that there was a real energy in the air and a real. So I had a theory,
What you got?
but I wasn't there.
You weren't there.
I'm saying this from afar,
Okay.
so this could be way off. But that's what pundits do, right? We make stuff up.
Yeah.
Is that what you do? Wait a minute.
What we get ready to start?
I had
we're
a
about to start a
feeling
fire. I can feel
that
it.
many people who are active in members of the black community in New Haven who are active in civic life returned to City Hall and felt like for the first time in 2 years it's our City Hall again. Now, this is not what I mean by this. What I don't mean is like one group takes City Hall, it's our turn. No, it's our turn. I mean something different, because when there's a black mayor, it doesn't mean it's just black people in City Hall. When it's a white mayor, it doesn't mean it has to be just white people, right? But I think there's a feeling that the black community has been disenfranchised politically. And City Hall is a symbol of that. And Toni Harp's whole career, she was always someone who
Not
got just as
including
many
people.
votes from white people as black people, but she also had a sense of black identity. That there was a sense of black empowerment in her campaigns dating back from 87 or certainly 92 and 96. Was that the vibe? It's sort of like this got taken from us. Not that we own it and it's just for us, but like we're kind of pushed out of access and power in New Haven's political and civic life. And this was sort of a memory of not that long ago when we were proud to be part of it, good things to get done.
I don't disagree with that.
I'm not talking about private conversations. I'm
No,
talking
I
about
don't.
vibe.
No, I don't disagree
Vibe. I
with
don't
that.
disagree with
But I
that.
think at the same time, I would say, look what we done. That's what I would say. Because who pushed us out? We pushed us out. We did that.
I was going to agree with that. That last campaign was not so well done.
Nobody.
Karen Du Bois Walton could have been the mayor if she had run that year, in my opinion.
My opinion too.
But it's something separate from individual elections. Is
No.
that there's not a lot of no group is monolithic, right? And that's cool, right? People can disagree with each other. Hispanics don't all support a candidate, black people don't support a candidate, right? But there is a sense, I think, that right now in New Haven, people in power who are not black, especially, do not feel they have to respond to the black community. When App Foundation was buying that property that was going to have such a big impact on New Hallville, and truck treatment's a good thing, but if there was no sense from people in power who knew about this that they needed to touch base with that neighborhood. Now, areas that have political power, people in power feel they have to deal with them rather than work around them. When the police chief, without getting into all that, when the mayor picked a police chief who was seen as not part of or responsive to either black cops or the black community at large, the way that whole thing has been discussed and decided until the alderman stepped up because they're connected neighborhoods, I think politically the black community was invisible.
Yeah. That's how white supremacy works.
But it does. But as you were pointing out, Babs, at times the black community organizes politically so that they refuse to allow themselves to be invisible, right?
Yeah, that's a different day.
I think there's just to your point about the atmosphere. I think there was definitely a sense of welcome back, like welcome to your city hall, and also I will say that there was a lot, and Latino folks were very well represented at the event as well. It was a very black and brown event.
Mm-hmm.
Not that there was not white people there, but it was definitely a lot of diversity in one space, and I'd forgotten how diverse that gathering of people can be for
Which
a city
we always
event.
loved. We always
did love
celebrated
that.
that as New Haven.
Exactly.
And we
This is what
made
I
good
know.
things happen.
I'm equally stunned by the people that weren't in the room. There were a number of black people who were not in that room. There were a bunch of alders who were not in that room. So say whatever we want. It was celebratory. It didn't feel celebratory to me. It felt something different, but it wasn't celebratory to me. It didn't feel that way. And I know what celebratory is. It didn't feel that way to me.
It did to Maya. How about the?
It did to me.
And
But
people
again,
react different to the same
we're
situation.
younger. She knows politically a history that I don't have. But what I will say, the people who did speak made it a point to talk about Toni Harp as a consensus builder.
Mm-hmm.
And, that's so much a part of her legacy, that people had a place at the table when
And
she was
that's
married.
hard.
And honestly, I kind of was like, that's a dig at Elliker. It is. Like, it just is. Like,
I think it's a capacity issue
yeah.
more than anything else. Consensus building is hard. First of all, you have to want to do it.
Right.
And then it's not so easy to do it.
No, it's not an easy thing to do.
But it is easy to remind people to listen to Pundit Friday. Thursday, excuse me, WNHH FM.
It's going to always be Pundit Friday on Thursday.
That's right. It's Pundit Thursday and Friday. Who said the following, folks?
Uh-oh.
With Markeisha Ricks and Babs Rawls-Ivy. Quote, we are saying, hey, we're not going to pay these outrageous taxes. I'm going to go out speaking my truth.
Oh,
I don't know that one.
I just saw
The
that
initials are
somewhere.
MB. One town over.
So it happened in Hamden.
Yep. Okay, good guess. Marjorie Bonadies is the leading Republican office holder in Hamden.
She wants to go be with the
only one
more
who gets
reds.
elected and contested elections. She's given up.
She moving to Alabama?
She's moving to same thing, North Branford.
Close
And
enough.
She said people there are more conservative like me.
Yeah.
The taxes are lower.
Uh-huh.
She didn't say some other things one could read into all that.
There are fewer
And
black
she
people
said,
here.
she said, I'm at my last budget meeting this week. I'm leaving town. I give up. It's not going to change.
Bye, girl.
All right.
Don't let the door hit you.
Someone wrote that in comments.
Babs, you wrote that?
No, I didn't, but I wished I would have.
Listen, if you don't want to be here, please leave.
Yeah.
So we all have a place to stay.
So those are the big questions. I didn't know the small question that related to our first issue. So in Hamden, they used to think there was this magic number. They have a huge we have them too, but they have it worse, back debt issues. They never funded their pensions. Their debt is huge, right?
That's
So just to pay old debts, they have to raise taxes. So a couple of years ago when they hit 50 mils, people said that's the tipping point. People are not staying in Hamden for 50 mils. And there are people when they're looking at houses say, I can't go in New Haven or Hamden, taxes so high. Not everybody, right? And Margie Bonner, he says, I'm leaving. My taxes went up $1,000. Other people, when they said, we have to leave, it's too much, a reporter asked, how much is that? And they say $300. I mean, there is such a thing called inflation. But anyway, so there was always a given. Babs heard a lot when she was in Alder. She heard, from people, working class people on the homes, whatever. They say, you can't just keep taxes. After a certain point, if you raise taxes too much, you bring in less money because so many people will leave and the values will go down. Now, that's theory, right? And at some point, you can't, right? But is it true? Josh Elliott was in here. He's a Hampton State rep. He said we should raise taxes more, and I'll tell you why. We have these big debts. The state just did a great job, which New Haven didn't do, Hamden didn't do, taking some of this windfall money they got and paying down those pensions so that for the next 20 years you're not paying so much for them. We should pay to undo the mistakes of the past, tackle them in a real way. If we have to go to 55 mils, he said, I don't believe this accepted conventional wisdom that if you keep raising a few more mills, people are going to leave. You got to raise them those few more mills, bite the bullet, make it a better town, give us long-term stability, and people are going to be able to afford it. And you're not really, it's like the way everyone says we need a 25% gas tax that might save you $50, and meanwhile your daycare center shuts down, so someone's out of work for thousands of bucks, and you got to stay home from your job. Like, how much does stuff really add up to?
Right.
And it's just when I was hearing Josh talk, I was wondering, who's right?
I think, listen, every time the stamp goes up, the postage stamp goes up, everybody gripes about, I can't pay that much for the stamp. And I remember when stamps used to be like a dime or something or whatever. Now they're like 55 cents a stamp or something.
We're not even going to talk about the price of the daily newspaper or a beer.
And yet people still mail things. We
I
still
don't know.
mail
People don't
stuff.
buy that many newspapers anymore.
Yeah, well, I mean, we still. I think he's right. I don't think people will en masse leave New Haven
He was talking about Hamden.
or en masse leave. Well, Hamden maybe, but
Who said this?
never mind.
Babs Rawls-Ivy, Markeisha Ricks, here on Pundit Thursday for Friday. Who said the following in the news? Quote, if I say This is where we're going. Doesn't work anymore.
Oh. Who said that?
Ooh,
Not the police, not the mayor, not the Yale, not. Who said that?
That Marquisha's brain is working. I see
my
it.
brain is working, but it's not working fast enough. Oh, I need another hint.
Okay. It did work differently for his father and uncle, who had the same job he has.
Vinnie Moore?
Yes. Okay.
Oh.
So Vinnie Moore Jr. is the Democratic town chair. People call him the boss. His uncle was Arthur Barberi, who really was like the boss.
Yeah.
Down to the mustache and the asbestos contract in the back room, right? And his father was a transitional Democratic Party leader where you still can kind of boss stuff around, but it was, he had a little more persuasion in different ways. Now he's up there at a convention, right? They had a state party convention, Democratic State Party Convention.
I was there.
How was that?
Oh, it was fantastic. I was in like nerd heaven. I even got I became an alternate delegate, like on the spot. And Vinny, and I was actually like a gopher for half a second for Vinny. He was like, "You." He's like, "Go get this person. Who's this person? Go find him." I'm just running
And
around.
you're in a big room. It wasn't like
great.
packed all close together because of COVID.
No, because we were in the big
Amphitheater
hall.
Yeah. So it was. And he looks like he is like directing traffic.
He loves
it's
that. He
fantastic.
loves to feel like he's
got
wheeling
his
and
game
dealing.
face on. He's
But in
like,
truth,
"Ah,
it
it's
was
great."
limited. He couldn't do something his father and uncle could do. So there he was with the largest group of delegates in the state. New Haven produces the most votes of any place in the state. If you want to win statewide as Democrat, you got to get New
Get to
Haven.
New Haven, yeah.
When you run for senator, Chris Murphy practically moved here his first term.
Oh, wow.
Because we got him over for his first term.
Right.
Right? He went to New Hallville Ward 20 on election day, saw the line out the door. He said, "I won." And he was right. It's like, so we have the biggest group of delegates. But we haven't had a candidate on the ballot statewide since 2006.
Yeah.
So he wanted someone there. So he came and he had two candidates he wanted to get nominated. He wanted to get Karen Du Bois Walton to be state treasurer candidate and Maritza Bond to be secretary of state. He could not deliver his whole delegation the way his father or uncle could have.
Right.
He did work hard. He loved the wheeling and dealing, and he got a majority, pretty good majority for Karen Du Bois Walton, somewhat a majority for Maritza Bond. Neither of them won the nomination, though a different New Havener did for state treasurer, Eric Russell. But he's saying that's because politics has changed. Like even as far back as 2010, New Haven did 100% for Ned Lamont to be governor. But a lot of people didn't like that. The mayor, the town chairman said, "We're going for Ned Lamont." Ned Lamont lost the primary in New Haven. Democratic people came out and went from Malloy instead. Nowadays, before the convention, Ward 25 had their own straw poll. They wanted Eric Russell and Matt Lesser. So some people say politics has just changed. That people don't believe in parties the way they used to. The biggest group of voters is independents. Vinny says, they have access to a lot more information than they used to find out about candidates. There's less largesse to give away. There's some largesse in government, but not the same number of contracts, and especially jobs used to be able to get out. Like Arthur Barberi on Crown Street used to be able to say, if you're going to get a job or I'll get you to this post, if you vote for this person, we're going to keep track of everyone for even down to ward committee. Morrow thinks it's more persuasion on the substance now. Like you do your backroom talks, your private talks to try to get your people in place. You try to convince people it's good for the city as a team. You try to even make some deals. But you can no longer say, I'm getting 70 people and they're just going to vote like this as a block and we're going to negotiate for that at the convention.
I think the Democratic Party has to go back and remind people why they are in the Democratic Party.
There's a lot of talk about that.
And because I think they've not been unified around a message of late for the last 20 years. They hadn't had a profound message to rally people around. So people because they don't feel like they're being heard or they don't have a unifying message. They're like, well, I'm gonna just get over here and do what I need to do in my best interest with my neighbors, and if it's under the Democratic umbrella, okay. But if it's not, listen, this is my interest. And I think the Democratic Party needs some leadership that not only inspires, but has a strategy
Big question
mind.
now for this fall, because you have these election deniers now who are going to be running for governors and senators
Right.
in states where they're going to try to undo elections.
And there's that sentiment too among independents that they don't quite trust either of the parties, right? And so, and like they really like that because the number of them, like people just don't see, I feel like, see party politics as necessary in the same ways that,
No question.
people were like, I'm a staunch Democrat or Republican from birth.
People are more
Yeah.
individualistic in society, period. Now it's drawn to groups. John Stefano.
Or even if they're not individualistic. I think about, people who've been
Different
involved
kinds
in
of
Black
groups.
Lives Matter
Yeah.
and things like that, who are like, I don't trust any of y'all. And with good reason. Because they've seen people do things that they don't think are in the best interest of the collective.
Yeah.
So they're like, I can't support, but you cannot extract yourself from this process, not participating in the process. Because I noticed just even like attending my first convention in that way as a participant, I started to think about all the people who don't know that you can, if you're in the room, you can be made a delegate on the spot. So like just those things and understanding how the party works. People get mad at the party, and I think on Republican or Democrat, they don't like the way the party's being run, but they don't get involved in the party's politics. So you can't change something you're not involved in, right? Like you can't have any influence on that if you don't understand how it works, if you don't understand who holds the power and how to get to the fact that Ward 25 is like, I'm had this breakout moment. We're going to do our own straw poll and that's going to be what it's going to be. And the party boss can't get them back in the vote. He can't do anything to them. Back in the day, he probably could have did something to them.
Someone lost a job.
Right.
Someone lost a leg.
But because people aren't maybe dependent in that way, lost a leg. Because people aren't dependent in that way, unions still have a little bit of that here in town. But like, even then, it's still hard. Like Taisha Walker was talking about this at Tony Harp's event, like how hard it is to keep people together when you need them to do something. And
That's what I think they need. I think the Democratic Party needs to reimagine itself.
And they really need to go after the meat and potato issues that most Americans agree on. Like, you don't even have to get into these kind of ideological fights about whatever. Like, there are most Americans agree that an option of an abortion is a good thing and a safe one. Most of them believe that. Like, go after the things that people believe and stop trying to go after the people who are never going to support your cause.
I agree.
And Mayor
Never-
Jay Grandi,
think-
by the way, is writing in about a bad eviction case he has, Marlowe, and wants us to talk about the end of the moratorium ending too soon. It was all in good faith. Thank you for that, Marlowe. We care a lot about that case. We're going to follow up, and then good luck with your court date. And we also think they ended the eviction moratorium too soon, and we're going to have a lot. If you look at the New Haven Independent, we're doing a story just about every day about what's happening with evictions, and we have a newsletter and periodic articles about ways to get help. So thank you for bringing that up. So you said I apologize, Bob. You
No,
said
that's all right.
the Democratic Party needs to redefine
Reimagine itself and remind people of what historically what they have done. Like, under Democratic leadership, this happened, and we are the party that can get things done for your greater good.
So
for
John
your greater
DeStefano
good.
argues that that you should get rid of party conventions, and that on the local level, just have open primary, and have everyone be able to vote in it. And then in New Haven, they think just have runoff elections. He said that's what we de facto have. We have Democratic primary, then the top two candidates end up running the general. One person, re-registers that unaffiliated. Why not? And his bunch of last elections were like that. And he said, and then 2019 was like that. He said, why not just have everybody runs in the first round? And if nobody gets 50%, then you have a second round with the first two finishers. Another alternative on that would be ranked choice voting, which is what they're doing in New York, they're doing in Maine, they're doing in parts of California, Colorado, I believe. What do you think about that? The idea is that there's so many independents, they should have their voice heard too. The parties really don't deliver a coherent, important message or group anymore, and that people have changed. They care about the issues like Black Lives Matter. They don't care about the fealty to the party.
I mean, voter disenfranchisement is real. It's very real, and I think we only think of the obvious ways in which voters are disenfranchised. There is a force at work to put these fires in places that draw our attention away from what we really ought to be doing as voters and as citizens. So yes, let's try all the things. If that's going to get us closer to the democracy we say we want, then yes, let's do it.
Well, then let me ask you this. Who said this? Ready? We're on Pundit Thursday, and we're trying to figure out what news story this is attached to and why does it matter. Quote, no parents should have to bury their child. But I cannot,
But
in good conscience, take accountability for an act that I'm not responsible for.
What?
Oh, I don't know that one.
I don't know that one.
There's something heavy about that statement.
It is.
Daryl Valentine delivered that statement in court last week.
Oh, that's
Daryl
the-
Valentine was convicted of a double murder at the Athenian Diner in 1991.
Oh, wow.
He always said he didn't do it. He named the same detectives who were later found to have framed some other people. After he's been in
It
prison
was a
since
wild
91.
town.
So a parole board last week said, Daryl Valentine, we're forgiving the next 57 years of your sentence. You're free.
Wow.
Oh, be free in a minute. Here's what was interesting about that. So when we read about other cases where people say they were wrongly convicted, when they go before a parole board and they want to get their life back, they face a dilemma. Because if you go there and say, like, I really didn't do it, you know?
Right. Like, that's not a place to
parole
plead your
board
innocence.
says, well, then you're not getting out of here because you still haven't.
Right. They want you to say,
haven't
I'm
accepted
sorry.
your culpability,
Yeah.
right? So that is a catch-22. And that some people just, because there was that great story about this woman who wrote a whole novel about this rape, and the guy was falsely accused, and he definitely didn't do it, and he just couldn't tell the parole board he did it. So and he stayed in there for decades, and then they finally released him with new evidence. So Daryl Valentine said, "I just can't lie," but they let him out, and the woman on the parole board made it clear in the subtext that they did think he was framed. Now, we had Colin Cheng did a big story in The Independent. We understand about a few months ago. We understand that was part of the file, and people were reading that. That was quite an interesting. I mean, I have little hope from that.
Well, back to the case about the woman that was raped. They was going to make a movie about this thing, and the producers were the
Found-
ones that did the
digging.
digging
Yeah.
and
So
found
this
his
doesn't make
innocence.
sense. Yeah.
Can you imagine if that never happened? He still would be sitting in jail.
That's wild.
And he was a long time. He was in prison for decades.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He became an old man.
Wow. But this also like speaks to the idea that like justice as we understand it and the way it's delivered in this country has a lot to be desired. The fact that we don't go to every extra mile to make sure this is the person that did the thing. And there's just too many cases of people who have been snatched up because we want to close this case or because you fit the profile. And so, you know, you're snatched up, your whole life is taken away. The people you love most die while you're in prison. You finally get out or your innocence actually is discovered and your whole life is gone. And, you know, I know the money is, you know, here's this money that can't replace what is taken from you when you are put behind bars in our country. Like you don't get that back. No amount of money can buy that back.
And there's a lot of cases like that.
There is a lot
And my
of cases
thinking
like
is,
that.
If you lock this person up wrongly, where's the person that actually committed this crime?
Right. A lot of cases still out committing crimes, right? Like, and what happens is that person finally gets caught doing something else, and they like, oh, you went down for that? Oh, you can tell them I did that because I did, and you know, and you know, I'm already in prison. I'm not getting out. Like, and particularly, it's usually when that person is like in life, a life sentence for some other crime that maybe would have been prevented if they weren't.
Yes.
You know, where they were to be able to commit it because somebody else went to prison for that. And because we have a system that does not encourage you to fight your case, right? We have a plea system that says if you plead out now, you'll get less punishment.
That's what blew my mind back in the 90s when they first had cases where some guy got released. His name was Thomas Daniels, and the advocate went to interview him in prison before his release and said, like, you pleaded guilty to a murder you didn't do. He said, yeah, because this is all rigged. And I had done other stuff, and they told me I was going away for long. It would be less if I just plead.
If I didn't plead now.
And that's that whole system of plea bargaining is heinous.
It is.
And ought to be looked at in the same way that we're looking at solitary confinement.
Or like the
way
mortgage
that we're
fraud
looking.
stuff. The mastermind of one of our mortgage fraud circles got very little time compared to people who made a
who were
fraction of what he
way
made,
down.
who he hired to do legal closings because he gave them up.
Right.
My father was a lawyer. He was not a criminal lawyer. He was a civil lawyer. And he had concluded before he died that the competitive system of justice does not work. Because, you know, the idea is always that it's not a perfect system, but it's better than all the others. But both sides have, well, because, you know, they set you up in Russia. They decided who was guilty in the Soviet Union. He said, like in our country.
Okay, but Germany's doing all right, isn't it?
Yeah, everybody gets a lawyer who has an incentive to make the best case for you. And my dad's argument was that the incentive shouldn't be winning. You shouldn't get rewarded more if you
Correct.
win. You should get a vigorous defense. But the reward should not be to try to fool for someone guilty. The reward should be to try to help the system arrive at the truth. So
Right.
there are injustices where people with less money or less power do not get the representation. They should get full representation, aggressive representation. But that you don't make more money as a lawyer or get more honor because you've won cases or high-profile cases like, Alan Dershowitz or Johnny Cochran. You get
Yeah,
it.
but we done set that in motion now. So how
Right,
do you?
and then now you got lawyers who are invested in the way the system exists, right? Like they're like, I would like to drive very nice cars. I would like to wear very nice suits to court.
And I'm not going
And
back
I'm
to not doing
and my
that.
wife wants to vacation in Europe.
So
Like,
so if you want my services, this is what
this
it's
is
gonna
what
cost.
it's costing because this is America and
Yeah.
everything costs in
And
America.
and I'm the best at what I do. So
Well, you know what
what I
doesn't
mean?
cost anything?
Listening to Pundits on Thursday.
On WNHH, New Haven's home of community radio, 103.5 FM, live stream, newhavenpen.org. Markeisha Ricks and Bowser Ivy in the house. Lucy Gummer's resting up to come back with
Get well, Lucy.
fire
Lucy.
next week. I would like, with your permission, to start a quote without the first word.
Uh-oh.
The subject of the sentence will be missing, because otherwise it would tip off what the quote is.
Okay.
Can I give you a quote
It's
that
like
starts?
Jeopardy
I
on
know,
steroids.
or like that NPR game show.
Okay, quote. Who said this? Quote, ... summons readers to confront painful and urgent realities at the heart of American history and society.
What is this? Like critical race theory? What is this?
It's giving that for sure.
So something summons readers, so it's probably a book, to confront painful and urgent realities.
Banned books?
No.
Okay.
There was a book co-written by someone we loved in New Haven who isn't alive anymore.
Oh, is it Winifred Rembert?
Winfred Rembert.
Oh.
He wrote a book about his incredible life story.
I swear you'd make a good
Surviving
trivia
a
host.
legend.
I know.
We're gonna have a New Haven Independent WNHH trivia,
Trivia
night
night.
at one of these
Wait,
bars.
At a bar.
And you're just gonna
Yes.
read things from the Independent, small quotes, and people gotta guess them.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
Winfred wrote this book
Put a
about his
pin in
life.
that.
But have you guys read the book? I read the book. It's amazing.
I have the book.
I have the book. I haven't
Someone
read it
very
yet.
nice to me gave me the
It's
book.
one of the most powerful books I ever read.
Yeah.
And I knew Winfred Rembert. I didn't know all these stories. And he was the leather artist
Yeah.
who kind of got discovered later in life while living in a rundown house on Newhall Street. His wife driving a school bus. By the time he died a couple of years ago, he was being displayed in galleries all over the country. There were 2 documentaries made about him, a children's book. And then his whole life story was told with this woman, Erin Kelly, who's a professor in Boston. And it's this beautiful book with the pictures and these moving stories, escaping the chains gangs, going to juke joints as a kid in the South, the drug war in America up north, living in New Haven. And it's raw, it's painful. It has no illusions about injustice, but yet it, like Love Babs Love Talk, it makes it real, but it makes you feel better about being alive and that love is possible and a better life is possible without illusions. And he won a Pulitzer Prize.
did.
And that it came out of nowhere. Because, sometimes books when Pulitzer Prize don't sell a whole lot.
Right.
Debbie Applegate from New Haven had one a few years ago. So that was the quote from the Pulitzer Board talking about the book.
Oh.
That's fantastic.
And over the years, that's just my story. I met Winfred, right?
Mm-hmm.
When I was doing that story about someone who stole money from Community Action Agency.
Oh, no, I don't know that
A
story.
guy named Milton had scammed with envelopes or something, and he
Oh.
siphoned tens of thousands,
New
hundreds of
Haven is a
thousands of
wild
dollars
town.
that was meant for anti-poverty funds. So this
and
back
he
in
was
the-
like, yeah, and I'm not
I was
going to be
supporting-
poor if
He
I
did it
steal
with
this money.
envelopes?
Yeah, something about like contracts or
What the hell?
So back then,
He's
I
like,
was
you know
thinking,
what?
like,
I'm not going to be poor.
I was working as a reporter for New Haven Advocate. This 20-something years ago, and I said, I want to find out where that money went. So he bought a bunch of houses. So I said, I want to check out these houses. So one of them was on Newhall Street. It was like year 2000. So I bang on the door, and I thought the door was going to come down when I bang on it. I thought when I walk up the steps, it was going to fall down. This house really looked like it was going to collapse. I wasn't sure anyone lived in it. I opened the door a little bit, and there's this man in a dark corner. It's daytime, hunched over these tools and some leather. And then I looked like,
You're like, is
I was
this a
thinking, like-
sweatshop?
and I was thinking,
Like, what is
I think-
happening
I think-
here?
I think that's pretty cool. That thing he's doing. And he knew who I was.
Did he know who you were?
Yeah.
Oh, that's
And I
cool.
said, hello, sir. I'm writing about Milton Greenglass and this house with the Advocate.
It's like, what
do you
doing?
think of Milton Greenglass? And he said, Paul.
And he's like,
I said,
God?
"Paul." I said,
Is that
said-
you?
It was God speaking. And he said, Milton Greenglass is Jewish. I go, yeah. I said, you're Jewish. Why would I say anything bad about Milton Greenglass? And meanwhile, I thought the roof was going to collapse on Winfred Rembert, right? Living in this hovel that was bought with stolen anti-poverty money. He said Milton Greengrass drove me down south to where I was almost lynched.
He had loyalty to
He
him.
bought me all my equipment because I have this talent in drawing, carving leather scenes of my life. And he's a beautiful man. But the beautiful man was Winfred Rembert.
Yeah.
And I felt over the years, so a Yale gallery director kind of discovered his work. They exhibited him. And then it got all over the country. The stuff started selling for tens of thousands of dollars per picture or more. And Melissa Bailey went around with him at different places. He was like, singing and performing. And he got recognized in the Jim Crow community that almost killed him as a hero before he died.
Wow.
And I always felt I couldn't do him justice in writing about him. I felt this man was so beautiful. Because you remember running into Winfred Rembert. I mean, like, he was this kind, lovely man who was so positive about everything and made you feel good.
We're gonna do a Vanguard Award for him
Well,
at the Arts
here's what I
Council.
wanted to ask you. So Winfred Rembert went to schools all over the state to inspire kids. He was never invited to a New Haven school until a couple of years before he died.
Are you serious?
And New Haven has never honored Winfred Rembert. He's got a darn Pulitzer. He got documentaries, gallery shows all over the country.
I'm sorry,
children's
he's
books.
been on the cover of the Inner City several times over the years.
Of course, the inner city knew about him. The journalists knew about him.
But
the
it
news
sounds like
knew
we
about
went
him.
very
But the
far
school
to
system,
name a school after Barack Obama
That's
and
what I
not
wanted to
Winfred
ask
Rembert.
you.
Ooh.
What are we going to do in New Haven
Ouch.
to make it right? If the Pulitzers, yes, you made it right in inner city.
Well, the Arts
Arts Council.
Council, I started this conversation before he died about creating a Vanguard Award and putting some money attached to it so that an artist of his caliber can continue to make the kind of work that they want to make. And having conversations with people who know how to raise that kind of money to do this thing. Right. So we are going to do that. As God is my witness and my term as chair ends, that's my thing I want to do, because I so admired him. I've spent time with him, talking to him, and I just thought he was prolific. I think Paul too.
His work's fantastic.
We don't respect artists enough, all kinds of artists, until somebody else says, "Oh, look, this
and
is
even
talent."
then they did it. That's what I couldn't understand about New Haven. So we had this person who was clearly the most talented artistic talent, the greatest artistic talent in New Haven for 50 years, right? Nobody came close. We have had wonderful musicians. Yale School music now is free, so they get the highest cry of the crowd. There has not been an artist like Winfred Rembert in our city. Talent, inspiration, humanity, beauty. And he,
on
yes,
the
the inner
award,
city
I
did
want
him
you
right.
to come and tell that story.
Let me ask you something else. What if we name a school after Winfred Rembert?
I think we should.
Let me ask you something else. His family, I believe, still lives in that house. What if $15 million were raised?
Yeah, what's the Historic Preservation Society doing around here?
What if
What we
someone
doing?
raised $15 million? They spent $1 million buying, renovating that house. Let Patsy and his
Like a
daughter live
museum?
upstairs. A museum. And what if it had an ongoing endowment from that, where you hired just a couple people and you preserved his work and exhibits and had hands-on work for young people? It doesn't have to be carving, to tell the stories of their lives through art.
I feel you.
I love this idea.
And there's so much good video
and
of Winfred
I know
Rembert.
just the person to talk to about this.
Oh, yeah? Okay. I was thinking of one, too. Winfred Rembert.
Y'all better.
Winfred Rembert had wonderful videos. You would have amazing displays of him singing, showing how he did his work.
Yes.
New Yorker had a
I
beautiful
love this
video on
idea.
him. The Independent had all sorts of videos.
I'd like to buy, if there's a house next door, I would prefer to buy the house next door and move the family to that, or
I see.
what, you know what I mean?
Either
so
way,
that,
like it helps the neighborhood too. That way,
yeah, so that the family doesn't have to live in a museum.
Right. Like
Right,
they don't want to
'cause-
What
be.
about upstairs?
They don't want to be exhibits.
Yeah.
No,
No, I
or
just
they
don't.
live upstairs.
I just want their space to be private.
Yeah.
So
like
we can
left their
find a space to the
households.
left or to the right.
Yeah.
All right.
Cool.
So we made it
I
there.
love this idea.
Yeah, let's do it, Paul. You know I love power and influence.
Well, you are. Babs
You do
Ivy
love
is
power and
it's
influence.
really
I do.
in the room. Babs, anything happen in New Haven now, Babs is making it happen.
Hey.
So you are here by dispatch, Babs, with all our
Ah.
support.
Yeah.
The
Well,
Like,
Winfred
add to your
Rembert
list.
School, Winfred Rembert Scholarship, but we're not stopping there.
no.
We're gonna have the Winfred Rembert Museum
Yes.
on Newhall Street.
Yeah. I like that.
I love this
15
idea.
million with 10 million of it in endowment.
Yeah.
Because if you get 3% a year, you're gonna have enough money to pay staff, a couple staff people, a couple
Yep.
outreach to schools,
Yep.
exhibits with video and hands-on work.
I like it.
I love
We
it.
did it.
Okay, let's get on that.
Thursday Pundits. We figured it out.
We figured it
We
We
out.
took the news and
And I know there are
inspired-
people that are listening to us, Paul, that's gonna
Right.
get on it with us.
Get your
All right.
checkbooks, people.
Like that 15. We just need 15 mil.
It's not a lot.
Well, thanks for getting on it with the pundits on Thursday. Babs Rose Ivy, Markeisha Ricks, the best pundits in the business, along with Lucy Gelman, who are wishing a completion of
Feel
her
better, Lucy Gelman.
Right.
healing, and we'll be back with you next week. Thanks to Harry Droz, the best station manager in the business. We're going to take it out with the Afro-Semitic Experience, performing I Wish I Knew How It Would Feel to Be Free from the group CD A Plea for Peace. It's Paul Bass inviting you to fly free with us all day and all night. WNHH, New Haven's home for community radio.